while it's hunting there. Okay, this is the college prep English class for homeschoolers at Excellence in Education. And let's share our screen. I'm gonna find there we go. Okay, we are up and go, have far more than we have time to get through. A lot of interesting things have popped up this week. And you both have papers in there. So does Brian, so does Azariah. And I've been holding off on going through the papers of missing people on the assumption that we'll be able to do so in the future. But if they continue to participate online, then I'll have to go ahead and treat those.
Was Brian here last week?
No, Brian wasn't here last week.
Really?
Last week?
Who was here last week?
Yeah, I think he was. Azariah wasn't, but Brian was.
Azariah wasn't. Yeah. Was Brian here last week?
Yeah.
He was. Okay. Okay. So much for taking roll. All right.
Thank you.
Anyway, we've got lots of stuff here. Let's go ahead and bring up the agenda, and then we've got a bunch of other interesting things I want to share with you here today. As you can see, some of them are popping up, and some new stuff which we haven't really talked about very much. Okay, the agenda. We've got our links and discussion of submitted projects and essay topic and content lists. You all have your essay topics and content lists. And some project discussion held over for this week. And we won't get to those, we will see. And again, following up on the requests we had in class, more scholarly journal readings, vast resources have been made available to you, and I want to look more at some of those. I've got some new ones. And more TED Talk type material for language immersion. We have a good deal more of that. And in response to a request, we engaged in conversation last week on the Brittany Stinson essay. Now, were you both present last week?
I was present online.
You were present online in real time?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Okay, no need, I think, then to repeat that. I have it on the agenda largely for those who would not have seen it. So, okay. So, these are the four. I had three, and you suggested another one. These are the four content checklist items, I think we can call them. We want to incorporate detail. This is, after all, a story, and we're telling an engaging story, something that will hook the reader in from the beginning. And the theme, we've got to have some sort of a theme, and the theme, of course, in the one that Costco, rather artificial thing. I have some suggestions for some themes, and I think you folks do too. Let's look at those. And comments from history, science, philosophy, something you want to include. And this is very important. As homeschoolers, you have a tremendous opportunity here to show people how superior homeschooling is. And so there are lots of things you could bring in. And I'm going to come up with some suggestions for those. But material from science, material from history, from philosophy, from many different sources in many different realms would be perfectly expected and legitimate. And especially if you have interesting discussion at home with your parents and in other realms of your homeschooling activities. Bring those in and use them. And you don't have to necessarily say that it was so-and-so who gave it to you, but it gives you a tremendous opportunity if you want to go beyond that which is normally expected of a high school student without appearing pretentious. Put the words into someone else's mouth, your parents or a teacher or somebody or other, with the implication, of course, that you understood entirely what was being said. Okay, and then language, of course, rhetorical devices, vocabulary, grammatical flaws. And the grammatical flaws are an important aspect. I have never seen a winning essay that didn't have grammatical flaws in it. They seem to be obligatory. Okay, we'll go over much of that again, perhaps today if you feel like it, but we'll skip that now since you folks have seen it. Okay, much of what we did last week will continue this week. Well, we'll see whether that happens or not. Everyone, please bring nuggets of erudition. Create a library of themes, vocabulary, historical, and scientific references to use in papers. Don't be afraid of using vocabulary. You can make an unusual word seem casual and unaffected by quoting someone else using it. Paraphrase that. Though discussion in your homeschooling family may not frequently touch on epistemology, quantum mechanics, recursive algorithms, Socratic dialogue, it would make sense to give the impression in your papers that these subjects arise commonly in dinner conversation. Now that may sound a little bit disingenuous, but to that end, perhaps you could research them and make it true. So give it a try. Put some thought into that. Do you have academic conversations in your families?
Well, about history sometimes it pops up because I'm reading something in a book and my parents are curious to what I'm reading. So yeah, we usually do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, typically we talk more about like current events and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that, of course, the language will rise somewhat, and perhaps you may be responsible for raising it. Note that odd set of verbs to rise and to raise.
In the family or
In the family.
No, that's tough. My family, they're staying at the same level that they're at. I'm trying very hard to get up and progress, but they use simple language.
I can tell, rather, the level of language that's probably used in your family. I can guess at that from what you've been doing, but I also feel that you have progressed immensely. And so that it's bound to have its effect in one way or another. Okay, to that end, as I said, go ahead and use, perhaps you could make it true. If you're in need of obscure words, have a look at these vocabulary journal entries. So go ahead, you've got lists of hundreds of words that are exactly the right words for the right thing. And so make sure you understand what they are. To which end, I have a couple of other devices to show you. There's a wonderful online resource called StringNet, which you give a word, and it gives you all the possible collocations and verbal phrases that could, in other words, how it can be used. And that was one way, for example, that I was able to determine that Ibsen's use of the word juxtapose was in fact stylistically wrong, because StringNet made that very clear. There are no examples of using it that way in literature. Also, make sure you use words correctly. Google them to see how they're used in context, or indeed StringNet. The great storyteller, Garrison Keillor, was mentioned. Some of his work has been added to our listening assignments. See the news from Lake Wobegon below. Now, I chose just one. It's probably just the most recent one that he did, and gave you a link to a number of others. And indeed, he's a wonderful storyteller. His language is not necessarily the academic language you're shooting for, but he does use words beautifully. He uses them in rather a standard colloquial sense much of the time. But his ability to tell a story is really unparalleled, especially when you consider that this story that he told, and I'm sure you both saw it,
Yep.
Is just this week's been doing that every week for 35 years.
Oh.
Take summers off, but it's amazing the volume that he's managed to produce.
That's all he does. He doesn't write books. He just writes.
Oh yes, he's written a number of books, and he acts in a number of the other segments within this 2-hour radio program that comes on an hour and a half or 2 hour. I'm not absolutely sure. Comes on once a week. So he's involved in a lot of other things too, but always one of the central parts, the beginning of the second half, is his news from Lake Wobegon. And I just watch those, and it's incredible how anybody can manage to do it the way he does it. Note that it's unscripted, and yet he manages to tie things together and carry you along in his story. And so storytelling is important, even in essays or in college admissions essays. Okay, please study this list of words discussed in the previous week. That's the that list that I gave you. Come on in. Let's grab you a chair here. You can sit on the other side or this side, whichever you prefer. Okay, so we can look at those if you're interested. I think what I did assign was I asked you to go through and take any that you didn't know and add them to your vocabulary journals. I haven't seen any new contributions in the vocabulary.
I'm going to be working on posting those. I won't be here next week, but the vocab journal should be updated by next week.
Okay, well.
I've been slowly updating it, just haven't posted it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I still have to add definitions for a couple of words.
I'm gathering words right now, so.
You're whiching
I'm
one?
gathering words.
Oh, okay. Well, you do realize, of course, that when I throw words at you, I'm expecting you to take the ones you're unfamiliar with and add those. And I try to give you something new and interesting each time. Okay, and then please read and prepare to report on more scholarly journal articles covering subjects of interest to you. Notice I edited this one since I sent it out and since I created this page. So hang on, I'm going to reload it so we get the rest of them. Okay, notice that I'm suggesting you use Sci-Hub, the directory of open access journals, or Library Genesis. Just discovered that one this morning. Genesis is an online library which thus far has contained every book I've looked for in it.
Wow.
Hi. Okay. Good. We're going to talk about college admissions essays.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let me tell you about these. Sci-Hub doesn't work very well, but it can be used to find scientific journals. It tends to give you file not found errors and things like that. And I don't know whether that's the way I'm using it. Maybe I should be doing it through Tor. But I was able, and this is significant, to find, where is it? This, and download it. This came out some time ago. Fei-Ching Chen is an old friend of mine. Actually, she's the wife of a friend of mine I went to school with. And she teaches at the National Central University in Taiwan and has a number of grad students, all of whom need to publish in order to finish their PhDs, and they have to publish in English. And so I have been editing their papers for some time. I had a big one last week, almost 10,000 words, and I managed, it took me straight through 6 hours to get through 10,000 words, and then I wanted to do a second pass. And usually I like to do a reading aloud pass because I always find something that I missed when I do the reading aloud. So anyway, this is one that I edited for her 10 years ago, I think. I thought it was an interesting one because I love the concept of let's do a paper on lurking. This is about people who read postings in online fora, but don't necessarily post that much. And are they actually contributing? And of course, she does a lot of analysis. Anyway, I was able to find this one online and download it, which was a wonderful thing, just to realize that all of the I can imagine are out there and freely available now. Please go ahead and read this if you're at all interested. Okay. I warn you that these things tend to be abysmally boring. But go ahead and look at it and see if you could see any stylistic errors or anything in it. But also note the way it's put together. Always starts with an abstract that says, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to conclude, and then goes into the introduction, which defines related work, and then the tools that will be used, and then goes on to the related work will list a lot of sources of papers that will all be represented down below in the references. This is appearing rather slowly. I just thought I'd throw that at you and tell you that's what you can find in Sci-Hub. The Directory of Open Access Journals, similar material, but that one has always been open access. And that one contains, among other things, the Journal of Unschooling and Alternative Learning, which is a marvelous thing for our purposes. And it has some really nice articles in it. We've looked at it in previous years. I don't know if I've mentioned it to you folks this year or not, but it would certainly be something worth looking at. And if you were to write an essay, an applications essay, and mention in it that you have been studying the contents of scholarly journals and mention this one, and perhaps even conclusions that were drawn as the result of this kind of study demonstrating the value of homeschooling, it would probably raise the opinion of you and your paper as much as it would anything else. You see what I mean? So that would be probably very useful. And library, I just discovered this morning, which contains, as far as I can tell, I haven't had a chance to really search it exhaustively, every book I could think of. And if you recall, I mentioned before that, for example, I wasn't able to find a link to the book by Eagleton here, Across the Pond, last week, in which I'd like to look at again for the sake of those of you who didn't see last week. And the link I gave you was the one to Amazon. The link is now a link to an online version of the book. So go ahead and read it. It's an absolutely delicious book. An Englishman's View of America. Okay, where are we here? Words. Okay. I threw this one in under language immersion. I have used this before in the past, long past. I don't know. Do you remember seeing this debate between James Baldwin and William F. Buckley?
It doesn't seem familiar to me.
Yeah, it's been years ago, I think. And of course, the debate itself was from the 60s, so it's some time ago. But Baldwin is an interesting character. He expresses himself very well. He was really the star of the show. This was a debate that took place at Cambridge University. And there were a couple of Cambridge University undergraduates who initially presented cases for and against the motion. And then Baldwin and Buckley. Now, Baldwin does very nicely, and he got us. It was really, and even the commentator said he had never seen that kind of response to a presentation there in their debates. Buckley, on the other hand, is just so facile with language. It's just a delight to listen to, whether you agree with him or not. It was totally unscripted. I believe all of the others were scripted, but his was entirely unscripted, and he doesn't need a script. It was absolutely wonderful. So I recommend that, and I will find more if you like. Okay, and here, of course, is the link, news from the link. Wobegon, again, under language immersion, maybe more, we should call it the art of storytelling. Okay, then this was from last week. Those of you who weren't here last week, or at least weren't here in a full duplex sense, what does that mean?
Well,
weren't present in class.
You weren't able to communicate in both directions. Okay, so do you have any specific thoughts on T.J. Clark's commentaries here?
I wasn't able to watch it, actually.
Okay, but it's nice. The reason I mention this, of course, is that, let's see if we can find it. There's Brittany. Here we are. This is a little excerpt from Across the Pond, An Englishman's View of America. And one of the reasons I rather like this, you've all read this, right?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to read just one or 2 points for those of you who haven't. I'm so glad you have. But let's see. So which is the part I'm looking for here? You tell me.
What are you trying to find?
Generally speaking, American students are like to teach, yet they are not always able to voice a coherent English even at graduate level. Some of them are easy to mistake for Turks or Albanians who have only just arrived in the country and are still struggling with the language. Only later does one realize they grew up in Boston. They tend to tie themselves up in great chains of unwieldy syntax, overlain with a liberal layer of jargon. Disheveled syntax is true of both genders, but jargon is confined mainly to the men. This is part of the painful demise of the spoken word in the United States. I feel funny about presenting this because this is sort of what I've been saying all along, isn't it? But suddenly somebody else here, somebody whose language I admire immensely, is saying exactly the same thing.
I'm just curious. Didn't you ever have a chance to have language and be as skilled as these people that we are following right now? Yeah, didn't you have an opportunity or something to become these people?
In other words, what's my language background?
Yeah.
Well, it's odd. My appreciation for the English language is relatively recent.
Huh.
Although through most of my childhood, I heard it well spoken. My mother went to an English public school, and using poor grammar at home was really not acceptable and didn't really happen. It didn't really occur. But I majored in languages, not English. And then only later on realized that English just has so much to offer. When I started teaching these classes a little over 10 years ago. But of course, I learned from the people that I'm presenting to you right now. And again, I maintain that everyone, all of you, learned to speak, and learned in some cases to speak quite well before you ever learned to read. And indeed, you probably did it before you were 2 or 3 years old. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I think everybody has that intuitive ability to learn from auditory input, to learn language from auditory input. Only later on do we learn to do it from the printed page. Some people grasp onto that and find it's preferable. Some people, I think, still work more effectively with the auditory input. I'm one of those. I was a music major in school, so I appreciate the sounds. Okay, and then he goes on to another one, and this is one I really wanted to mention, is one of the finest exponents of the English language in the United States today has been the art critic T.J. Clarke. Another was the late Christopher Hitchens. And of course, he you know about. I discovered him long before I discovered Eagleton. But T.J. Clarke was new to me, so that's why I dug up material by him and put it into our classroom, which I thought you would appreciate. Okay. So go ahead and read across the pond. It's a fascinating view of America from abroad.
Yeah, and on the do landscapes have identities. He was pretty much what he was doing. He would get paintings of small proportion or big proportion, and he would pretty much just dissect them and point out some of the elements of that painting.
Yeah, that was it. It would just sort of wander off, and I believe it's the case in art criticism as much as it is in literary criticism that little thought is paid to whether the author really had that in mind. And so, but it gives you an opportunity to let your mind wander. And his wanders beautifully and very eloquently. And so it was very interesting to listen to. I find it very hard to imagine taking a class and certainly taking tests on the subject. You see my point? It's very hard to tell what on earth a test like that would entail unless it involves further rambless maundering, which indeed, I suppose, one who'd listened to him for a while would be able to do with a fair amount of felicity. Okay, so we've got the Baldwin Buckley. Has anybody had a chance to see that one yet? I think I put it up Sunday or Monday. Okay, so go ahead and take a look. No, it wasn't Sunday or Monday. I think it was Tuesday.
What was that one about?
Oh,
Baldwin?
I actually did get a chance to see the first video, but not the debate.
Oh, okay.
So I saw the first one where he talked about education.
Oh, okay.
I did too.
Yeah.
And I saw about
he's talking to a bunch of students.
Yes, about education.
That one.
And
that's the one I was able to see, and his language was really good on that.
And he had some really good points to make too, didn't
how
he?
Society kind of coaxes people into certain corners based on labels.
Exactly. And one of the things he actually said is, if I were your teacher, I'm not sure whether he was talking to students whom he was teaching or not, but if I were your teacher, I'd be telling you, don't take anything I say for granted. Subject it to analysis, consider it, do experimentation if necessary to determine whether it's right. See if you can step beyond the suppositions that are imposed upon you by society.
Yeah, don't just follow the leader. Actually check out the leader before you follow him.
Good point. I think that's a good way to say it. Okay. So yeah, there were two of them in there. I'd forgotten the second one. The first one. The second one is the debate with Buckley. And okay, that one it may be uncomfortable, and I apologize if it is. He says it, he comes out and says it very clearly, and he uses the N word, and he talks about history.
He says Negro.
There's an awful lot of that in there. He uses the other N word too once or twice. He does, not the opposing. And so if it's uncomfortable for you, don't watch it. But I think he does a fine job. Okay, so we've got Clark there, and then this is material that we had last week. Ken Robinson's Ken Robinson on talents and passion, and those are two different videos. And then there's a panel discussion. Now, this is the weirdest panel discussion. First of all, what did you think of Ken Robinson?
The TED Talk I saw was Raul Martinez's.
Okay, that one's right down here.
Yeah,
now.
I didn't get a chance to see.
Yeah, I saw him too.
Ken Robinson's.
Okay, that was new this week because I forgot to put it up last week.
I thought that. Wait, you forgot to put it up last week? I remember watching it before last week.
I put it up in the classroom,
Yeah.
but I don't think I had it in the agenda. So you must have found it. I think I only just put it in the agenda.
Yeah, he was discussing how just the probability of being born is so great, and how you have your parents, and a sequence of events must occur for them to. Example, his grandparents, they were on the same street, I think. They lived on the same street, and the sequence of events that must occur for one to be born is it's like
Are we talking about the same? Are we?
Yeah, because he talked about how if you're raised in a family, I believe a certain way, are you generally gonna?
We're talking about Ken Robinson, right?
No, we were talking about
Raul
Raul
Martinez.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got them confused then. I will take your word for it.
Yeah. Raul Martinez was the one talking about how rare it is for you to be on this planet because of all the sequence of events that had to happen. And what we believe is based on where we were raised. And it's a very interesting topic because, like, if you're raised in a Muslim family, you're going to be a Muslim. If you're raised in a Christian family, and he talks about which one of those is actually right and wrong and stuff like
With
that.
a high degree of probability.
Yeah.
Not necessarily 100%.
Yeah, because sometimes there are conversions.
Right. So these assumptions, these acts are presupposed upon us, and we regard them as axioms without necessarily questioning them at all. Okay. Yeah, Robinson, we may watch some more of his. He's just so good because he talks about the failings of education in general. Mm-hmm. He's not really much of a homeschooler. He doesn't really mention homeschooling as an alternative.
Yeah.
He just talks about how we could be doing so much better than we are doing in school, and that indeed what we are doing in school tends to be putting kids to sleep when we should be waking them up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who's on the panel discussion here? Do you remember? That was so weird to see all of those people there. Did you all get a chance to see that? This is the third video on that screen. There was Ken Robinson, of course, mm-hmm. and that's how I happened to see it. There was also Murray Gell-Mann. Remember, we talked about him last fall. He was mm-hmm. the Caltech physicist, talking about questioning received opinion. And most of the time, received opinion's right, but you still have to question it because that's where you may find the next breakthrough. But then there were a number of others, a couple of other academics I didn't know, the Dalai Lama, and what's his name? Ulrich. That's his real name. That's not. Anyway, he's an interesting character who writes beautifully and uses the English language. And I will come up with his Eckhart Tolle. uses the English language beautifully. But as I said, English is his third language. And one of the things I like about him so much is he writes his books in all three languages, and he produces audiobooks in all three languages. And it's just, I find wonderful to listen to a master of language saying his own words. I think it means so much more. And so I've been, well, I've listened, I think, to all of the books he's written in both English and German. My Spanish isn't good enough. Okay, so Raul Martinez, as I say here, note his choice of words. He does come up with wonderful phraseology. The talk is very clearly memorized and imperfectly delivered, but masterfully penned. And I think he does a better job really in giving you this synopsis than he does in the film itself, which I've seen. Okay, reading. Eagleton, I already talked about that one. Brittany Stinson, you've all read that. And you've all probably, how many different successful college applications essays have you read?
Probably like 3 or 4. 2.
Okay.
I'm planning to actually application essay though in about 2 weeks.
Okay. One thing I think I'm going to do is, I'm not going to write an applications essay completely for you, but I feel like writing one with a number of possible ideas that might inspire you to come up with your own variants of them. And I'll give you that you can play around with. And if it's appropriate, you're welcome to the ideas. They might actually help a good deal. Any of the rest of you been reading those and determining effectively what?
I just read a couple and no, I can't figure it out just yet.
Okay. Again, I think you'll find that all of them have those 4 points.
Yeah.
They'll have detail. They're going to have reference to learning subjects, and they're going to be compelling and a good story. And
They're interesting, right?
Yeah, they are.
They are interesting, and I think, to me, the most important part is they are all well written. They are not perfectly written, but the language does soar so much higher than most of what you see on mainstream media.
In comparison to those essays, the college application essays, the 100 successful ones, how would you rate those and compare to our essays currently right now?
I don't think yours come up to that level.
Okay.
I think they could. There are a number of little failings, and for the most part, you will see them pointed out. But most of what I point out in your essays are grammatical and stylistic improvements, and which I think would improve the language immensely. I haven't really mentioned a lot about content or talked a lot about content. And content is trying to come up with a library of references, things that you can refer to when you're writing your essay. What does Brittany Stinson refer to? She talks about conquistadors looking for El Dorado.
Yeah.
She talks about Andrew Jackson and his predilections, both positive and negative, and his nickname, Old Hickory. Now, these indicate that she's actually acquired knowledge from various different sources. You as homeschoolers, of course, you could bring all kinds of things to bear in the same way. But of course, instead of, in this case, it's interesting, she's talking with her father about these subjects. Well, how many public school kids actually talk to their parents about the topics that they've been studying? Relatively rare, but you do it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so these are references you can easily incorporate into your material.
I've been studying a lot of Europe
Mhm.
at around the 14th century. So that's what I've been talking about with my parents.
Uh-huh.
Pretty much, yeah.
14th century. Okay. I always thought of the 14th century as there wasn't a whole lot going on then yet. We didn't have the Renaissance yet, and the Middle Ages didn't really provide much. The 15th century, we have an awful lot happening. And one thing I feel like suggesting to you is, well, what's the big thing that happened in the middle of the 15th century?
Well, there was the Renaissance.
Yes.
There was the Turks taking over Constantinople,
Okay.
and
Yes.
the end of the Hundred Years' Wars.
What about in the history of education? Knowledge.
It was the printing press was
Right.
invented. That's right.
Very impressed. That's the one I was
Yeah.
aiming at. Good for you. You've been putting a number of things together. But of course, the Gutenberg press, or at least the movable type, really had an immense influence. But it took a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Took a long time for it to happen. Nowadays, that kind of thing just happens overnight in the computer age. There's an interesting documentary on the Gutenberg press, if you're interested, done by Stephen Fry, but he manages to stay up to all. He's got something intelligent to talk about. And so we can find that out there if you're interested. It's very good for your ears. Okay, where were we? College admissions, college applications essays. Only a tiny percentage of those essays written end up successful, certainly in the higher level colleges. It's less than 5% in most cases. And so when you come across one like Brittany Stinson's, which got her into 6 universities, major universities, you realize, there's got to be something about this that's worth studying.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it is worth studying.
A formula.
A formula, right. Now, what we have to do, of course, is come up with that formula or understand the formula. Never steal anybody else's words or ideas, especially words. Ideas are hard to pin down, but when it comes to words, you can always do better. It's really the bottom line. And you can quote me in your essays if you feel like it. But the point is, you can find something to weave out of your own homeschooling experience, which really surpasses anything that anybody in public school is likely to have. Do you see what I mean? You're open. Only one person can be valedictorian, but when you're a homeschooler, you are the valedictorian. You can define your own history. You can define what you're doing. And if I were putting together, for example, an essay, I'm going to give you some suggested ideas, but elements that you might consider incorporating would be looking around, for example, at scientific papers and understanding how they work and following the references in one and finding those in others. That's really one of the best ways to go. You go to Wikipedia, but never quote Wikipedia. They don't appreciate that. But look at the references at the bottom of Wikipedia. That will take you to some real entries, some real resources. And you will find those real resources in Sci-Hub or Library Genesis. And you'll be able to go along. How many of these admissions officers actually know that? Probably not a lot. And how many papers have they published? Yeah, probably not a lot. Okay. We exhausted everything here? I think pretty much. Well, the last little bit of research I wanted to throw at you here. We've already read The Journalist and the Homeschooler, the article about Robert Fisk. You've already read that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The University of the People. If you haven't already, go ahead and visit their site and understand what they're doing. It is a fully accredited university with no tuition.
Yeah.
It's free, but very limited offerings at present. Do you have something?
Yeah, I actually went to check it out, and it seems pretty good. They are accredited by what's it called? Credible sources.
Well, it's the regional accreditation which counts. So the Western Association is what they're accredited by.
Are they a good accreditation source?
It's the only one that's generally acceptable. Various other unaccredited organizations have created their own accrediting organizations, you see. And so it's the Association of Western Schools and Colleges that would apply to us here. And they call that regional accreditation, and that's the one that counts. And all of the schools and colleges and universities have to be accredited that way in order to be recognized, with a few exceptions. I believe that Harvard has refused to be accredited. It's not as though they need to be.
Yeah.
But no, I think this is just such a wonderful idea. I would like to know somebody who's actually gone through it, see how it works for you. Okay, older assignments. Let's just go over and make sure to hit points we've got here. Okay, I will quiz you on this one. This is a paper, if you want to call it a paper, I wrote last week, and I thought you might grade it for me, but I'm not sure anybody even looked at it.
I didn't see that.
It's a Yelp review.
I saw
I
it,
put
but
that in the writer's forum.
yeah, I didn't think about reading it because I thought you were doing it for someone else.
Okay. I do say a review assignment for comment.
Yeah, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't even see
We'll look at it in a moment if you don't mind, but let me make
Yeah.
sure to
So
hit yours.
you wanted us to go through it
and
and
correct it like
grade
you do.
it like you do our papers, right?
If you'd like, or at least make comments on it. If you see a stylistic error, by all means, say
Okay.
something.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Man.
Andrew, we went through most of the mechanics of this, I think, before a little bit. Well, let's just take a look at it. These are mostly suggestions. When you talk news being uninformed, I feel uninformative was more useful because uninformed assumes they didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Uninformative means they didn't say anything. And most of the time, I think it's uninformative is probably more accurate. And then they use photos that are not from the same that they're reporting on. Yes, indeed, they often use stock photos. You know, just pull them out of their database. Okay, and here you kept on having a little bit of problem using the word terrorist correctly. It said government to step in and implement new security laws against terrorists. Now, if you made it plural, it would work.
Singular.
If you made terrorism, it would work, but it doesn't work in the singular there.
Yeah.
In the past few years, as the press leads the public on massive trails of misinformation, I felt in the past years, as the press has led the public down tortuous trails of misinformation. Do you see why I made the changes there?
Yeah, it raises the level of the English a bit.
It raises the level of the English a bit, and it also uses more of a correct word. Massive doesn't mean a whole lot, but tortuous. We're talking about a trail. Our metaphor is expanded by making it a tortuous trail. What does tortuous mean?
Basically a very hard trail, almost like it's torturing you.
Well, not necessarily, but that may be a good way to remember it. It means windy and convoluted. And you lead someone down a trail more than you lead someone on a trail. Now, the reason I'm mentioning these, this is called collocation. Collocation simply means which words are used together to convey a meaning. And there's a fine line between making sure that all of your collocations are idiomatically correct English and falling into the trap of using nothing but cliches. We want to avoid the latter, the former. You have to lead someone down a trail. You don't lead someone by a trail or on a trail as often as you lead them down a trail.
You can lead someone on a trail, right?
You can, but the question is which one sounds idiomatically better English? Do you understand the word idiomatic?
Yes.
And this is the problem that non-English speakers have trying to come up with something in English. They don't get the collocations right. And to that end, I have a new resource that I want to show you on how to make sure to get your collocations right. I was actually expecting or hoping to discuss that with Brian because he had some examples in his paper that I wanted to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that one. Let's see. Are there any other questions here? Little things like there's a typo, I think.
Oh, yeah.
You probably meant TOO when you said two. And this last paragraph is very nicely written.
Wow.
Very nicely done. Okay, good work. Now, of course, here an interesting point you're bringing up is the see, what is the subject? Subject is terrorism, and the extent to which terrorism has been used as a tool to manipulate, perhaps. And indeed, I feel that you've made your point very well, and it's one with which I don't take issue. But I start to wonder whether I've been having too much influence in your view of the world. But it raises some interesting points. And one that came to mind is a fascinating little video that I put in our classroom. And I'll take it down if nobody's interested. But I'll give it to you for next week if there is interest. We tend to be terribly insular in the United States. We only see what the news decides to show us. And I found this odd little thing. It's not very little, actually. It's well over an hour long. It's an awards ceremony in the Swedish Parliament. And number of speakers there. One of the awardees is Edward Snowden. Number of others as well. And it was just fascinating to see how it was done. It was all in English. And the level of English is better than the level of English that you'll hear on the news or or from politicians or anything. It was really rather interesting. And Snowden got, before and after his acceptance speech, a standing ovation from the entire Swedish Parliament. Other things that were interesting about it were the Swedish Archbishop's speech. I find that one fascinating. And also the fact that between each of these presentations, they had a musical interlude. They had people bringing in, some cases, very odd instruments, Swedish folk instruments, one sort and another. Some cases it was a Joni Mitchell song they started out with, but very interesting president. I've watched it several times. It's fascinating. And as I said, the whole thing's in English. Does anybody want to see it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it's about Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
Especially since they're making a movie on him now.
Actually, I think today the trailer just came out. I haven't seen it yet.
It's more of an action movie, not really that representative of Snowden.
It's hard to know.
Yeah.
It's hard to know. But it is a big thing. And he's a good speaker. He really is a good speaker. One of the other speakers is Alan Rusbridger, who's the editor-in-chief of The Guardian. He can speak too. So you've got some pretty good material there. Okay. Azariah, we've been saving this for you. Okay. You put together something really very interesting about unusual poetry here. One of the points I'd like to make is you get your references to centuries off by one. Did you figure that one out? Okay. You see that the first century is the century that takes place from the year 0 to the year 99. And so we call that the first century. So the year 100 to the year 199 is the second. Our label for centuries tends to be off by one. And so when you talk about the 19th century, Ezra Pound, in fact, was in the early part of the 20th century. Okay. One of the most influential and vital poets to write modern, none other than, I find is not really a necessary phrase. It's not necessarily appropriate. It doesn't really hurt, but born, okay. Throughout Pound's career, and indeed you're referring to him correctly, refer by the last name, but you do want to apostrophe S here to make it possessive. Okay, in the 20th century. Was born to Isabel Weston. You said in which he was their only child. That didn't work very well. I felt it was just easy enough to throw that away and say, he was born to them, comma, their only child. We don't really need to say any more than that. Both Pound's parents, we may not even have to repeat that, having said his name once, but that's fine. Migrated from England in the middle 17th century. I can't tell you whether that century was right or not. I didn't look it up. Okay, here's a really interesting unidiomatic usage. And it's hard to tell you what the rule is that you broke. When you're looking at the word following and ensuing, there are certain situations in which you could use either one. After that took place, in the ensuing days or weeks, the following took place. Or in the following days and weeks, that works fine. But you can't say, and this is interesting, where is it? Here we are. Following his early elementary education, Pound attended Cheltenham Military Academy. You can't say ensuing his early education. It just doesn't work. And I'm not exactly sure why you can't say that. But indeed, it has, following works, ensuing doesn't here. Read it aloud. You'll find ensuing is really used as an adjective. It's not used as an adverb. Okay, nicely done there, and a reference to biography.com. Now, when you're talking about an introduction to the literary scene, are you talking about Pound's introduction to the London literary scene?
That was a mistake, yes.
Yeah, so we're not talking about London being introduced. Okay. And then we have a book of poem. We want an S there. Okay, and personae collection, I think we need an L in there. These are typos, I assume. Do you use a spell checker?
Sure.
It's a great way to cheat. And I hate to say it, it's really a great way to learn too.
Yeah.
I was always a dreadful speller until I got something like that to tell me whether it has two L's.
And then you remember.
Remember, that's right. To some extent. Okay. Pound, who was born in Haley, Idaho, revolutionized poetry with his new fashion of poetry. Why did I put that and in there? It doesn't work. Okay, I think I didn't see the who up there, because if you leave out the who, then it needs the and. Pound was born in Haley, Idaho, and revolutionized poetry. But Pound, who was born in Idaho, get rid of the and. The and's wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, his early life at Cheltenham Military Academy and the University of Pennsylvania. University of Pennsylvania, interesting, is one of the 8 Ivy League colleges. Liberal arts program can be given ample credit. Doesn't really don't really need the word ample. I'm not even sure what it means, but can be given credit for his writing ability. Even his earliest Lume Spento is a masterpiece. The word masterpiece is a single word. Okay, Pound's natural aptitude for writing and his invention of imagism all contribute to his title. We need to have the his there as one of the most captivating and interesting poets of the 20th century. A lot of other interesting things about him. He was an expat. He left the United States. He supported Mussolini and Hitler in the Second World War, right?
I found that out after.
Well, it's still interesting. And that's the sort of interesting thing, by the way, that you want to hit an admissions officer with. You see what I mean? You don't necessarily want to take sides one side or the other, but throw something unusual that they weren't aware of. Anyway, very nice, very nice. Okay, here we've got Nicholas's well-stated. What is this one about? Benefits of exercise. I feel like saying something about getting these papers in before the deadline.
I didn't
Please.
submit it on Thursday at 10:34 a.m. I submitted it Wednesday at about 7:00 p.m.
But you do realize that the rule is get them in before midnight on Tuesday.
Everybody enters the papers in on Wednesday, though, right? Yeah.
Well, everybody seems to be thinking about them at the last minute. The problem is when you give it to me at the last minute, I may not have time to get to it. Last week, for example, I was just under the gun to do this paper, so I didn't get a chance to look at anybody else's paper. And I didn't even get your notes and the assignments out until Sunday because I had meetings all Friday and Saturday. But that's why I'm asking you to get them in on time, partly because I can't count on myself to make sure to get everything right. Things fall through the cracks if they come in at the wrong time. Okay, so good solid writing, well stated, but in some cases repetition seems to suggest you did not read through aloud. I really find reading through aloud helps immensely. At the end here, for example, when you say, with this increase in energy and all these benefits that are followed by exercise, and physical exertion? How about these benefits that follow exercise and exertion? It seems like a good deal to work out. And then you say, with all these benefits that are followed by exercise and exertion, it seems a good deal to, you've repeated the whole sentence.
That was incorrect there. I think I meant to put something else there because I remember cutting something and pasting something and
all I can say is
I'll go through it
read
again.
it aloud
Yep.
before you end it.
that's
Okay.
that was unintended.
I really didn't think it was intended. Okay. Things. This is not absolutely the way you have to do it, but what you have here is an appositive, in a sense. You could have set it apart with commas when you say doing something physical or completed, comma, a physical or tough task, comma, that one feels happy. I like using dashes. Dash is a nice way to put something like that apart from everything else. You know?
And I think it should be completing because I'm impressed.
Yeah, it does look as though there's a problem there, which I'm sorry I didn't catch. Doing something or completing of, right, I think you're right. Okay, what's the synesis error here?
I remember typing something up and I'm thinking, you know, I might have a synesis error in there. Let's see.
And any individual is singular. There's plural. That's the error. It's very, very straightforward. Okay. Now here, when you talk about the oxygen traveling from the lungs to the heart and the rest of one's physique, I don't think physique is the right word you want there. Body, perhaps. Physiology was my
I tried to use
suggestion.
the word body, but I had used it more than enough times in this
Right.
essay, so physique had was very accurate by definition to what I
I
was.
think physiology works better.
Okay.
Look them both up and see which sounds best to you. Okay. Made of form strong equilibrium, many beliefs as to why. As to why is commonly used, but I felt about why or regarding is a little bit more comfortable than as to. And the apostrophe S here for the possessive. And here we had throughout the body are detached when needed to the endless demand for oxygen. Now we're talking here about red blood cells conveying oxygen throughout the body.
Mm-hmm.
So they are satisfying the endless demand for oxygen. Yeah. I don't, the word feel just doesn't work there.
Yeah.
This process is called respiration. This is believed to be one of the multitude of causes of what? I have no idea what you're talking about there.
Yeah, I want to fix all this stuff up and resubmit it.
Okay. Just read it aloud.
Yeah.
Now, I find it's very hard to read to the cat. You have to find somebody you can read it aloud to. So inflicted upon others in your family who's standing around.
You know, I confess, I didn't read it aloud. I should have.
You will find that sort of thing if you do. And yeah, I do want to go over this with him. I hope he's okay.
What happened?
Oh, I don't know. He was missing, not last week, but I think previous week.
Ah.
And so I don't know what's going on with him. Maybe he's keeping up online. But one of the, he's using interesting words, and he's really looking for things, and that's wonderful. It's easy to misuse them, though. Mm-hmm. And so I had some suggestions here. English is the normality that one does not find the need to use obscure. I'm not sure what's going on there. But, when you find yourself saying, what is normally done, you talk about English is the norm rather than normality. Anyway, a number of other things there that I thought could be fixed by using this tool. And this is stringnet.org, and I want to show you folks how it works. Do I have it up here somewhere? I think perhaps I do. And there's the paper. There's stringnet. Okay. Here, for example, I put in juxtapose because that's the error that Brittany Stinson used in her paper when she says, I juxtapose, my small frame juxtaposes the massive cart when she's riding as a child in the shopping cart. But you don't use juxtapose that way. And here, what I did was I threw in juxtapose and I said, let me see all different ways it tends to be used. You can say be juxtaposed with, or by juxtaposing and have an article. There are a number of different ones, and I can even find examples of each of these by pulling them up. But none of them allow you to say, this object juxtaposes that one. Mm-hmm. I can say, I juxtapose this one with that one, but there's always a preposition there, the preposition with in that particular case. It doesn't take a direct object. Mm-hmm. And that's what she uses, of course, in the paper. And so this is a wonderful tool here. If I'm trying to think of another word that was used here in one of your papers that we could, let's throw in norm and see how that works. And see what it says. Okay, the norm rather than the exception. Perfect example of what I'm talking about. The norms of, and so with each one of these, you can bring up the examples here and see exactly how it has been used. And understanding how to use these collocations right makes your language sound idiomatically correct, as though it came from a native speaker, and preferably an educated native speaker. This is the biggest problem that non-English speakers have, is using the wrong collocations, getting them a little bit twisted and immediately sounding like a foreigner.
Mhm.
Now, when one needs to comply with the rules enough to sound like but then you're allowed to go ahead and expand upon vocabulary, expand upon metaphors and constructions and rhetorical devices in all kinds of ways. You're just not allowed to mess with the basic building blocks of the language, because that makes you sound peculiar. Does this make sense?
Yes.
You can experiment with other things, but you can't experiment with those. Oh, this is the list of obscure words that you might like to go through and find are useful to incorporate into your writing. Irrefragable. I mentioned that one to Azariah the other week. I had come across it in writing and never anywhere else until suddenly I heard Terry Eagleton use it. As I said, I've never heard anybody else use it. And so it's hard to know for sure exactly what the meaning of something is until you hear it's imbued with meaning by someone who understands it. And of course, Eagleton would be the one to use that. Notice that, okay, I apologize here. I knew this class would go by so fast. I wouldn't have a chance to get to everything. Look up these words. If you feel like one of these is just the right word, make sure you make sure that it is the right word. And trust me, if or obsequies or putative or even bibulous, you're going to find that you raise eyebrows. But there's no reason you shouldn't from time to time send an admissions officer to the dictionary. Okay, this was how I killed off last Friday. A friend of mine went in for an eye operation, cataract operation, and they need to have a driver. So I was a driver. So this is a Yelp review. I posted it up on Yelp.
You posted it on Yelp with correct grammar, am I right?
Do you see some incorrect grammar there?
No, well, you said you posted this on Yelp as well. I mean, for the purposes of review, but then you may have put errors in it and put it up here.
No, I didn't. I just gave you the posted up for them. I figure if I'm going to sit down and write this thing, I might as well use it in class as well as there. Exactly the kind of thing that I'm telling you folks you can do when you write something for some other class. Okay, so if you must go to this facility, be sure to read this first. Well, that's a bit of a hook. Do not use the address in your navigation software. The address takes you nowhere. It's better to use to enter this thing instead. This is the parking structure, which you walk south on Bedford to Brighton and west. Do not bother to go to the address you're looking for, because number one, there. It's out the door and around the corner or down the street. Okay, so in other words, I started out by providing some real information that's actually valuable. I can't imagine Yelp taking something down that has really useful information. But then, perhaps more to the point, don't go there at all if you have a choice. I was a driver for a friend going in for cataract surgery. After an hour, he was ushered in, but was made then to wait for several hours while other later appointments were handled, apparently because the doctor was late to arrive. No explanation was given for why it took 5 hours. The office staff lied on a couple of occasions about what progress was taking place, but they were probably personally blameless, just minions covering for irresponsible physician behavior.
Mhm.
It's not clear that the doctor was necessarily having trouble getting past the 15th hole, but in the absence of the courtesy of a credible explanation, one can only guess at the cause of his tardiness. Notice that I'm not saying he was playing golf,
Yeah.
but put that in the idea, in the mind of the reader. You see.
Now, were you waiting there for 5 hours, or did it take 5 hours for him?
I was
friend to
waiting
get
there
in.
for the total of 5 hours, which meant that our trip down there was during rush hour, and our trip back was during rush hour, and parking cost $21.
Wow.
So, and it doesn't take that long. It's an hour and a half. So one would have thought that at least there would have been an explanation. Though in Beverly Hills 90210, 1 block from Rodeo Drive, a number of indigent cadgers. Notice that you can use words like that. You know that they're going to know what you mean, even if they don't know the word. We're lurking about the sidewalks. I like the word lurking. And parking structures. The facility itself was uninviting and unwelcoming, with a number of minatory signs displayed indicating 24-hour surveillance, warning that the right was reserved to deny service to anyone, and my favorite, no outside food or drink allowed, as though concession stand revenue were a major concern.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there was no concession stand, nor refreshments of any sort to help drivers through the 5+ hours of waiting time. Notice the word minatory. How many people, do you know what it means? It's a threatening admonishment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly the right word. But you don't necessarily have to make sure to use a word that your audience or readers are going to understand. Yeah, go ahead, look it up. Okay, so if your doctor recommends this facility, it might save you and others a great deal of aggravation to share this and other examples of the many negative reviews this facility has deserved with him, her, and request a different referral. Other facilities are much more pleasant, organized, and considerate. Now, of course, the reason I'm giving you this is you understand that in one of the most powerful things you can do is write and put your words together. You can speak powerfully. If you write something like this and post a review, people don't ignore a review that's written like this.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And especially that last line. That last line is not just don't go to this facility, it's talk to your physician and ask for a different referral.
Mm-hmm.
The facility is not going to like that.
So were there a lot of other negative reviews for this?
There were several, yes.
Any positive reviews?
Yes, and usually there are. There are usually people who manage to go in and everything works fine for them and they're happy with it.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few places that have all negative reviews.
Yeah.
But when there's a negative review and it's full of detail and explanation, it's very hard to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. Have we covered everything? Let me look at all of the... Okay, I have not gone through Brian's, assuming that we are going to probably do that in the future. It's a nice paper. I really like what he's doing here, but we have to polish it a little bit. Okay. Your list of there's plenty of words here to choose from if you feel like using something a little less than obvious. And I've chosen all of these because they're useful. They actually mean something and very often have a very specific meaning that could be exactly what I need at that point. It doesn't have any jargon in it. It doesn't have any astronomical terms or botanical terms or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are in a different category. Yeah. These are ordinary words that are likely to describe something that would occur in daily existence and could easily be brought to bear on what you're trying to explain. So look through them, see what you find there. And please keep your journals up to date so that you're sharing things with others in the class. Okay, there's that other vocabulary practice. I'm sure you've all gone through there and found that you know everything in the list, otherwise you would have posted it, right?
Okay, well,
99%.
that's funny.
What for trepidation? Assassination? You know what assassination is? Do you know where it comes from?
I think it came from a Middle Eastern word, I believe.
It's Arabic. Very
Yeah.
good. Very good. Okay, and there's Eagleton. Please go ahead and read him. And here's
Yeah.
Stinson.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't gone through this whole thing with all of you. We have reached the end of class. I feel like looking at a couple of things here, a couple of the points I made, and perhaps you didn't see. This comment on the commentary, and I felt the commentaries were sort of skewed. This fellow Urania seems to have contributed 70 or 80% of all the comments. The others may have been quite different, but he in fact makes this grammatical error. And so I'm quoting you here the dictionary's comment on the use of the way he says it. I would advise Brittany to use less adjectives and adverbs. Okay, so this is not a major error, but it does indicate that you can't necessarily count on a very high level of erudition on the part of these people who are grading. Still, I don't think that means you should shoot any lower.
Yeah.
But it is an interesting question. All right. Before we conclude for today, what more do you need? Do you have enough homework?
Yes.
Are you sure about that?
I'm planning to make my next writing assignment the college application essay.
Okay. I will try to put something together.
Actually gonna submit it?
I'll see.
10th
It's kind of
10th
late
grade.
to submit it.
Wait to submit it?
Yeah, because most people would have already applied for colleges by now.
Well, if you're aiming at fall.
Yeah,
But,
that's true. For the fall semester.
If you're aiming at the University of the People, for example, I'm sure you
Yeah.
can apply at any time. So think about that. One of the points I've tried to make in the past is that you will find that your first essays be your best. So write a bunch of them, and you're going to get better each time, especially if you bring them in here and we play with them a little bit and you see some of the problems you're having. You're going to get better at it, but you really do need the practice.
Yeah.
So let's see a bunch of those. We've only done 2 Shakespeare plays this year.
That's true.
Do you want another one?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Okay. Anything else specific that you'd like to request?
I think that's it.
No, thank you. Not
Okay.
right now.
I'm going to give you this weird Swedish thing. I think you will appreciate it. I mean, it's worth it for that. But it's also just worth it to see a very, very different approach to governance. Okay, post any questions or comments or suggestions or complaints, and we will see you next week.
Okay.
Class 2 and a half.